Missy Ryle, the owner of Leverage Marketing in Grand Haven. Welcome to Leverage Lab Notes. This is our monthly LinkedIn newsletter. Today we're recording for our Women Leaders Business segment, Breaking Barriers. So thank you very much for joining me. And today we have Dr. Celia Egan with us from True Women's Health. She is the director of Obesity Medicine and Metabolic Health there. So she oversees that area and all the patients that come to True for that. So Dr. Egan, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you doing this with me.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I just wanted to start out by asking you give us a little bit of background about you and your work at True and what you do there.
Yeah, so I was actually born and raised in the West Michigan area. And after college, I wanted to spread my wings. And so I made my way to the East Coast and I did medical school in New York. And I did my residency there, which was really amazing because you got to see a lot of different cases and it was a completely different medical culture that was in New York City. And you were exposed to a lot of really smart people and a lot of interesting science that was going on. And it was really, really a great time to be kind of a young doctor. Of course, I had 3 kids. And so kind of by the third one, my husband and I waved the white flag and we know that West Michigan is the best place to raise kids. So we moved back to Grand Rapids.
Okay.
I've had actually a lot of different kind of roles in medicine. So it's been really great to try different things. And I think through each role, I've been able to learn something and bring something new to kind of my, role of being a doctor for a patient from all these settings.
How about so talk a little bit about obesity medicine, because that's not something that a lot of people know about. And you are double board certified in internal medicine and obesity medicine. So what was the interest in that? And then how did that tie into women's health?
Yeah. So during my, after medical school, doctors will do something called a residency. And that's basically where they pick what field of medicine they want to go into. I chose to do internal medicine, which is, I always make a joke, it's the medicine of adults. So we took care of really sick people in the hospital and trying to figure out why people are so sick, to taking care of people who aren't sick, who are fine, but, we're trying to prevent chronic disease. Okay. During my residency, I had the opportunity to work with one of the leaders in the field that sort of was one of the top 5 people that kind of began the aspect of obesity medicine. So, he was a scientist who said, look, all these people are gaining weight at an uncontrolled weight, despite, their decreasing calories and maybe they're exercising, but there seems to be something medical that's happening and something, we're going to use the word pathologic, that's pushing these fat cells to expand or maybe don't shrink, that we're not sure about. And lo and behold, as unfortunately our country has continued to see this disease progress, the more we've came to understand what is the disease of obesity and all of its comorbidities, such as type 2 diabetes, obstructive sleep apnea, vascular disease. And really, it's been a really explosive field because there weren't a lot of answers for people. It seemed to really be affecting more and more people. And it really was at the treatment of obesity is really at the root of treating a lot of the chronic diseases that we see on the outpatient side.
Right. Yeah. So things like what you're talking about of type 2 diabetes and metabolic disorder, talk about that a little bit, because I think we hear that term and a lot of people don't know what that means.
Yeah. So, when we eat, our body has a whole system put into place to take whatever food we're eating, whether it's a liquid food or a solid food, break it down to our GI tract, move it into our body, sort and distribute it into molecules that our body can use, like our muscle cells and our brain cells, and then have a backup storage plan for later. So again, if you think about a bear that hibernates all winter, there's a whole biochemical plan that happens over the year to allow a bear to gain as much fat as it does in order to, kind of sleep for long weeks to months and not go out and seek food. So all that is all the signaling processes back and forth. And when we talk about metabolic disease, I think about it as there's some miscue in that system, somewhere between where the food hits my tongue to where it's at in my blood. There's some pathologic reason for why it's not moving that food along the way that it should. Sometimes it ends up as extra fatty acids, we'll say, and that can be someone who has high cholesterol.
Mhm.
Sometimes the liver just puts too much sugar out into the blood. That's having type 2 diabetes. Sometimes we just make too many fatty acids and they get stored in our fat cells, and that's having obesity.
Right.
All these things can lead to chronic inflammation, which can drive some of the bigger things that we see that can end people's lives, like dementia, cancer, or vascular disease. So they're all sort of tied in together.
Okay. And so like and I just want to know, I think people are curious about how, like, first of all, like, I think the thing that a lot of people still have a hard time with is admitting to or believing that obesity is a disease.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a long time we thought of, extra weight or this rapid expansion of weight as a personal failure. People would say, oh, like I am just not choosing to do the right thing. Therefore, it's leading to me to have all this extra weight that's there.
Right.
And, obviously our food choices do play a part in this to some degree, but sometimes not. Sometimes we see rapid expansion of fat cells, even if someone just changes one medicine, which can feel really frightening for particularly some women in particular. They may be put on one medicine for another health reason, and all of a sudden they're 30 pounds up and they're like, how did this happen?
Yeah. How did this happen?
I didn't change anything I've eaten. My exercise plan is the same. And it can get really frustrating and really guilt-ridden when a woman's like, what personal failure am I having in my life that I can't figure out,
Right. Especially like, and everyone talks about this, and we won't go down this path too far, but when you hit midlife and you have these changes with your hormones, and women are entering menopause and they're in perimenopause and they're having all of these other symptoms like hot flashes and night sweats. And so those night sweats are keeping them up at night, so they're not sleeping well. And so that makes them the next day, feel like they need like a quick sugar buzz or something like that in the morning to like get awake and do something. And then it starts this vicious cycle, right, of like weight gain and insulin resistance and like all of that playing into the hormonal part of it too.
Yeah. And I think that's what drove me honestly to women's health was because, a lot of modern medicine was sort of based off of men's health, and men's metabolic system tends to be a little bit more simplified, meaning their system does feel very manipulable, right? We all hear these stories where a woman will say, my husband and I both started a diet and he barely staying on track, and he's already lost 20 pounds and I'm following it to a T and I've barely moved the needle.
Right.
And a lot of it has to do with just women's biology is a little bit different, mostly because our biology was meant to have babies, grow life, breastfeed. If you can imagine the energy load that is, and that our body is biochemically getting prepared for, it's complicated. During midlife and menopause, when a lot of those hormones sort of take huge shifts drastically up and then slamming down, and all the complications that come with that, like lack of sleep, lack of energy, it just creates this snowball kind of in the wrong direction. Women's health is awesome because one, not only is it, scientifically a really interesting field to try to get a handle on and to try to make some progress forward, but it also is so impactful because a lot of times women are driving the medical decisions for everyone in their family. They're the main person who's mostly buying, preparing, and cooking all the food for their family. And so it's just very impactful if you can get some of this headed in the right direction.
Yeah, you're speaking my language now when it comes to marketing, because we do know that, 80% of all decisions that are made about purchasing healthcare products, anything, a car, a home, they are made or influenced by a woman. So it doesn't even matter if you're married or not, but most guys will still approach a woman and help, ask for help to make a big purchase like that. So I think talking about like women in healthcare in your role and kind of more in a leadership position, like what has it been like for you, and have you faced any challenges like in the medical sphere being a woman in medicine, and what is that like? Because it's still pretty dominated by men.
It's it's really dominated by men, I think, particularly in leadership roles. I think one of the more challenging aspects that I've run into is some of, I'm going to say like the camaraderie, like a lot of men in medicine tend to group together. I remember in residency, there's, internal medicine residencies have these big programs. And so I think there was like a program of like, we had a program of like, I don't know, 50 or 60 doctors. And we were broken off into these small groups and complicated logistics. But anywho, there was a group of 10 of us, and some of us were men, some of us were women. But one afternoon, all the guys went without inviting any of the women to go, like, I think it was like to go smoke cigars or something.
Yeah.
And it sounds kind of like a silly thing on the surface, but what you realize is later in life, when maybe there's one of those guys that becomes the CMO of a company, and now he's thinking of, well, who do I want to lead the obesity medicine program? Well, you know who was super awesome? That guy that I had cigars with.
I know.
Right? And it's this
you get left out of those opportunities to make
totally
those connections. Yeah.
You totally do. And I could sense that. I mean, that was one example. And I can sense it on different tiers. Like when you'd be in the doctor's lounge, the other male doctors would feel much more confidently talking to the other male doctors. And it wouldn't be about anything drastic, but it's those small little social interactions that create a bias that doctor's competent and that they're, warm and open-minded and all those things that people look for when they're handing out promotions or the next leadership role.
Right. The networking.
The networking aspects of this. And so that's been really challenging to figure out. The other aspect of that is kind of the hierarchy of working in a hospital system. So, I worked in a hospital for 5 years. You have to work very closely with the nurses. Majority of them are women. And a lot of it is balancing out that hierarchy where, like, a male physician may come down and say, hey, I need this, snap, snap, snap. And, oh my gosh, it's done and it's ready. Where a woman comes down and it's like, well, do you really need my help? Like, aren't you capable of figuring this out?
Yeah.
And that's just challenging because, again, it's just like everything else a woman has to do. It's just extra work, right? Like, so not only am I trying to get through my day, see all my patients, round in all my people, complete all the notes, do all the things that I have to do. But now I also have to do some of the things that maybe a male doctor wouldn't have had to do because this isn't the same relationship that they have.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And I think my husband's also a physician. And I think if I wouldn't hear some of his stories of what happens when he walks into the room, like he'll tell me like, oh, like constantly like, people are like, oh, do you need a cup of coffee or like what's happening? And I'm like, I don't think anyone's ever offered me a cup of coffee. Like any nurse has like ever offered me a cup of coffee. And again, I don't think that's because I'm more or less friendly to nurses. I think it is just kind of some of this internal bias. The gender factor that plays in. Yeah. And just those historical like
stereotypes, biases and stereotypes that people have around men and women in leadership roles and even in medicine. So like, as far as your like achievements and success career-wise, like what are you most proud of? What are you excited about? And what are you most proud of? Like, what was a significant thing for you?
I think one of the things that I was the most proud of outside of kind of working with Dr. Bittner and continuing to launch our program directed at women was one time when I was in the hospital working, I walked in the morning and a patient was really, we'll call it crashing, was quite ill. And within an hour, I did a bunch of different things. And it was very much like take off the white coats and you're putting IVs in and you're talking to family and trying to triage a bunch of things. And I think for the first time, the nurses were like, oh my gosh, this woman actually knows what she's doing. What she's doing, and she did it well. Right. Yeah. And I got nominated from the nurses of the hospital for an award. And I felt really just like, I just was like, oh my gosh, this was a really impactful thing. I didn't at the time think it was anything particularly special.
Right.
It was
like, you were just doing what you do.
I was just doing me, right? Like this is what we do when we're doctors, right? Is to come in and take care of business and handle all these different aspects. But apparently that was a lot. That was very impressionable on these nurses. And I felt just proud that they had said, okay, this woman came in and like this young, and I was young at the time, younger, just kind of took care of business and it was awesome. So I did feel proud of that.
That's awesome. That
Yeah.
is a great story. I love that. It's nice when you are just being you, doing your work, just head down, and then you get recognized for it,
Yeah,
and that
it
someone else
is.
said that was special, something that you did,
Yeah.
That's awesome. I love
Yeah.
that.
And I think a lot of times, one major aspect of medicine that I don't think a lot of training prepares you for is your relationship with families.
Yeah,
Not just the patient. They prepare you a lot for talking to patients, and we role
right,
play and we do all these things. But talking to families is its own art, because
yeah,
everyone's coming at a medical situation with their own family member in a completely
yeah,
unknowable way, right?
right, right,
Maybe they love their family members. Maybe they despise their family members. Maybe they just got in a
right.
big fight. Maybe they're scared. Maybe
Yeah,
they're exhausted. Like you don't know what you're getting yourself into, particularly when they're now acutely ill. A lot of these emotions become like enhanced.
oh yeah,
And
yeah,
so it can just be really intense. And not only that, but some people are coming to a medical problem with a different understanding of where that medical problem is. So maybe their partner's in the hospital and that person truly believes that their partner is going to make it. Right.
right,
And everything in their mindset is there that that person's going to live.
yeah,
And then all of a sudden they don't. And it's very challenging
yeah,
to be the person on that back end to say, I'm sorry they didn't make it, even though this
right,
is a months to years long journey down this pathway of cancer or chronic
right.
vascular disease or something. But you never know what that partner or
How
that
they're going to respond to
right,
that.
right, yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. I imagine that would be hard. I experienced something similar to that when my mom was dying of cancer. And, there was not conversations at home about how far along she was in the disease. Like we knew certain things, but I was young too, didn't know what I know now. But I remember when the physician came in and told us, that they, weren't going to do a surgery on her leg because, she had broken her leg, and that she was terminal, and we were looking at 2 weeks or so. And I just was like, what? Like
yeah,
in shock. And I remember him looking at me kind of like, this has been coming for a really long time, and you're still in shock. So yeah, that would be hard as a physician to have to navigate that, because everyone is coming to that scenario from a different perspective, and what
yeah,
their personal experience was, and what conversations were happening within that family unit, and
correct,
how
yeah,
much information was shared, right,
yep,
that kind of thing.
yeah.
So how about for you as a physician, how do you come back from a setback? Resilience is really important to me, and it's a big important thing here at Leverage. Our core values around okay, if we have a setback, how are we going to be resilient in this situation? So
Mhm.
what about a time that you were tested and your resilience was tested? You want to share
Mhm.
a little bit about that? And it doesn't even have to be work related, but your personal
Yeah,
too.
yeah. I think one of the things that the word that I move in my head a lot is patience, because I think a lot of the times I'll have ideas of how I want things to get done, whether it be in my personal life or with my kids or
Yeah.
with my partner or even at work with patients. And you want it to be done in this certain way, the way that you want it to be. And that's the way that it feels the most right, most
Yeah.
confident to you. And I think the times where I've struggled, there have been times when I just want to keep pushing harder, and I keep trying to remind myself about being patient, and that
Mm-hmm.
even as a mother, as a partner, right, if you just stop trying to cram things down people's throats, that it can sometimes resolve on its own, and
Yeah.
you'll get to the end result the way that you want if you can just take a break, take a breath, pause, right? And
Mm-hmm.
let another person just sort of be in that space. I definitely
Mm-hmm.
think that, particularly in obesity medicine, I kind of thought when you were a doctor, you just told people what they needed to know, and that they're like, thank you so much, I'm going to go do it.
Yeah.
That's not at all what happens, right? Some people want to hear it, some people don't, right?
Yeah.
Some people are in different places. And so sometimes you just need a little patience to
Yeah.
let that person sit with that, and maybe they'll agree or maybe they won't. and that's okay, right? But it's
Yeah.
one step closer to where you maybe want them to be, which is healthier or, you know, in a different place.
I can imagine that would be hard sometimes as a physician because you do know the answers. Like it's not subjective. I mean, I know it's not always like black and white like that, but you can give a patient advice and be like, if you would just follow these things, like this would get better. And that's got to be hard sometimes when you're trying to like, because so much of your work is education, right? It's not just, it's like, it's educating people and helping them understand like the processes that take place, the consequences of certain behaviors, that kind of thing. So, and it's like, sometimes that doesn't hit home.
No, and I think everyone's, again, as we said, everyone's coming to this with a different background or reason. And I think one of the things that makes obesity medicine wonderful and challenging is that everyone comes with their own weight vision, right? Of where they want to be and what that looks like. And so maybe if you're a woman who grew up and your mom was very petite and thin, and that was a point of pride for her, and she let you know that when you now are no longer petite and thin, but maybe not obese, that's extremely bothersome, right? And so it's trying to understand, how can I help this person be where they want to be and not necessarily fit into some box that I compare, but also trying to keep them safe, right? And acknowledge that everything comes with its own set of risks that are involved.
Right. And there's a bigger psychological picture to obesity medicine too. It's not just the medical part of it. It's also like the mental health part of it.
Absolutely.
So like for you, if you were to give advice to other women looking to go into medicine, even obesity medicine specifically, like what kind of advice would you give them if they were like, you know, this really interests me, like I would love to pursue a career in this area?
Yeah, I would say that, you know, the bulk of what this is a lot more listening than you anticipate, right? It's a lot more listening and interpreting where people are at and trying to match with where they're at with what we have available. Because I think, particularly with the expansion of some of the effective weight loss drugs, we're going to be able to solve a lot of these issues, but some of it is not going to match up with safety at the end of the day.
Yeah.
A lot of this is listening to where people are at and where they want to go, and what makes sense in terms of what's realistic in their lives. I mean, for the past 5 years, have just continued to get frustrated with just sitting there harping on dietary changes. No woman ever comes to my office and is like, Dr. Egan, I shouldn't be eating donuts. Thank God you told me, because I didn't know. Most women have a good sense of what they should eat. They understand the pluses and minuses. Sure, we can argue about a banana back and forth, but for the most part, it's, you know, it's pretty clear cut for women. They get it. It's just, they're busy doing other things. Even living here in Michigan, right? In a couple months, like finding a vegetable that actually seems appealing and healthy is difficult.
I know it is. Yes. Yes.
And even like I always make a joke, like I should do this better than anybody else. Because I know. And it's like, it's just really hard to do.
It is hard to do. It is very hard to do.
And I think it's not fair to keep just harping on that and reminding people women again and again, that they should do this, you know,
diet and exercise. And then we just get into that, like the whole, you know, we could spend a ton of time on that, but the diet culture, right? And the messages we receive on social media and all the places around, you know, body image and what you should eat. And then there's this new exercise program that comes out. And if you just do this diet, or you do intermittent fasting, or you do whatever, and it's like women are sick of that. Like they're sick of those messages. They're tired of getting that messaging, especially coming up into the holiday season. You know, like now is like the peak time where everybody is starting to gear up. And even in our industry, like we know like what we're going to see. We know what kind of like messaging and things like that is going to be out there. And all the marketers are going to be marketing, you know, all the new diets and all the things. So like, as far as women's health goes and like new developments in medicine, especially obesity medicine, I know, talk a little bit more about the new anti-obesity medicines that are coming out, because I think a lot of people have seen things or heard things, or you see articles and celebrities are doing Ozempic and all these things. But what are like GLP-1 medications, anti-obesity medicines?
Yeah. So I'm just going to backtrack a little bit of the history behind all this stuff.
Yeah.
So, we noticed that people were starting to gain weight uncontrollably, and it didn't seem to be, we could make some movement with diet and exercise, but not necessarily. And I think the thing that was the most shocking was that, let's say, for instance, like something like The Biggest Loser, you put people on a really extreme plan with, everyone's watching every single calorie that goes into their mouth. They're really working hard, and they succeed. Over 6 to 8 weeks, they'll lose a good deal of body weight. But then what we saw over time is that their body actually adjusted, and then it all came back, even if not a little bit more. And so that was really eye-opening, right? Because we were like, well, if this is truly that, like, shouldn't have that worked? Shouldn't that intense of a lifestyle program have worked? So what else are we missing here, right? So then we started using some different medications. A lot of them were geared towards parts of the brain that decide how much, we'll call it energy balance, we need to have, or how much fat mass we need to have. And those were somewhat successful. And then what we found in the field of diabetes was if we gave people back these certain hormones that we normally have that signal to the rest of the body that we have food coming in, we tend to be quite successful. And one of the side effects was that people lost weight. And that was really the beginning of what now will be the turning point in this field, is using different hormonal analogs, basically, to tell the fat cells, the brain, the liver, the muscles, that basically your body has enough food. It almost lets the body do what it's supposed to do in terms of energy balance. A lot of the times people will feel less hungry, and in particular, they'll have less cravings, and not just cravings for things that you think about like cookies or donuts, but kind of cravings for everything, even alcohol.
Right. Yes.
Which is shocking.
Yes.
And so right now on the market are two are mostly used under the names Wegovy or Ozempic, which is semaglutide, or Mounjaro or Zepbound, which is the drug tirzepatide. Coming out in the next 5 to 10 years are, oh my gosh, like 10 or 20 more different versions of this. They're keep trying to make the side effect profile better. They're adding different aspects to it to help preserve muscle mass and bone mass loss that we sometimes see with weight loss. And it's really an exciting time to be in this space, because it does feel like we have a real legitimate solution for people for the first time, and one that's not terrible. So like, again, we sometimes find some dietary plans that can be helpful, but people feel really deprived. And, they can't go out to eat with their families. They enjoy travel, and they feel really restricted in their day-to-day life. And that just creates a lot of, disappointment and animosity.
Yeah. And then it also kind of keeps that, like the crash diet thing going, right? Like where it's like this extreme, like I'm going to do it this time, and I'm going to, do this diet, I'm going to lose all this weight, and then I'm going to stick with it. And the reality is that most people can't. Like, your lifestyle just can't support something that strict all the time.
Not only that, but there's some concern about just different things in our environments that may be not allowing us to. So we've been using the word what we call endocrine disruptors. So again, if you think about all these signals zinging around, trying to tell your body what it's doing, like how much fat do I have? How much sugar am I burning through? Like, what's happening? We think maybe we're ingesting something. Maybe it's on our food. Maybe it's in the air and the water, things we cook with, and our makeups and our soaps, all these different things, that maybe there's something that isn't allowing that signaling to get carried on. And the only way to override it is to give us back what we're missing. Basically.
And I think that then lends itself to the argument around, like, well, just taking, like these new GLP-1 medications is the easy way. And that helps to explain, like, it is a disease. There is something going
Yeah.
on inside
Yeah.
your body that is causing it. It's not just like choices. It's not
Yeah.
just exercise. It's not all of that.
Yeah. And I hope we're able to move forward kind of as a society to acknowledge that there's no other real field of medicine where we put such personal blame on patients.
Right.
Even if like a patient were a drunk driver and they come in a trauma, one of the beautiful things about medicine is it doesn't matter. We take care of them regardless of who they are. Right. And so regardless of their choices that they made.
Right.
And so we hope that continues to be the mantra for all of our patients, even the ones struggling with obesity.
Right. I love that. Yeah, that's an important thing, an important message for people to internalize and to think about that. As far as like, I guess I'll ask you one kind of a little bit personal and career question, but like, how is it for you balancing your career in medicine and your family life? You said you had 3 boys, you have, your husband's also a physician. So like, what is that like for you to balance your career and your patients and taking care of them and have a personal life?
Yeah, I think sometimes it leads to a tough reflection of some of the choices that you've made and maybe having a little courage to make a different choice. I think when I made the decision to leave kind of a really safe medical system where I was basically guaranteed a paycheck to join sort of a small startup practice, that led to, that took a step of courage. And, but on the back end, I got to a lot more control over my schedule, which is something that I needed, and a lot more flexibility over kind of my day-to-day life. And sometimes it is just slowing down a bit to reflect on some of the barriers that are preventing you from doing all those different aspects of what you need to have done. And then sometimes it's also realigning your expectations. I read this amazing book and it was talking about the times that you have kids while working is really a small chunk of time of your career. And maybe during that time, it's being patient with yourself of saying like, okay, maybe I'm not going to be leading the obesity society, right? And be the president of the obesity society. But that doesn't mean I can't do it later. And it doesn't mean that I still can't do good things.
Right.
And really the overlap of your career of having kids to, your career in total is only like 25% of the time. And it's just kind of putting some of these stepping stones in place that when you do have more free time, then you can lean into work a little bit more.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's such a thing that so many women, I guess my philosophy around balancing a home life and your work life is more about blending your life than it is about balancing it, because that was what was important to me and why I wanted to start my own company, was because I wasn't going to be able to go to work and not think about my family and be with my family and not think about work. So that to me, I started to try and figure out ways that I could blend my life, that my work and my family could be on my mind at the same time and it wouldn't be a big deal. And so that was like part of our culture here at Leverage too, was to have that opportunity for everyone. We're a company of all women, so to be able to, because we are the ones who carry the emotional labor of a family, right? There's a lot more that goes on women. It's not just house chores and things like that. It's like the emotional part of, carrying the family. So, I like that. And you're right. Talking about courage, it does take courage to like put a little bit less emphasis on your career while you have those years with your kids, and to make decisions about your career that allow you to have a better work-life balance and blending.
And I sometimes think that I've heard, which I've taken to heart a lot, is that everyone implies that somehow being kick-ass at your job is bad for your kids. And that, women are rarely like, oh my God, like I'm killing it at work. Like, isn't this amazing? Like, look how much money I made. Look how much things I've done. I'm just like killing it. Like I'm the president of this and I did this. And like, And we tend to just like downplay what we're doing a lot. And we'll be like, oh, I mean, yeah, making it work. Like, and realistically, like, it's okay to say to your kids, like, I'm a doctor to a lot of patients, and I sometimes will say that out loud when I'm on the phone. I'll say, I need to take care of someone right now. And I'm a doctor and that's what I do. And that's okay for you. In my opinion, that's an okay message to send to my kids, to say, you know, there's other aspects of this life that aren't about you, and their mom is trying to care for somebody. And it doesn't mean that she loves us any less, but that's part of her life.
No. And what a gift that you're giving. You have 3 boys. Like,
boys, that's right.
You're giving boys a message around the equal importance of your career and job, just like your husband's, right? So they see both of you doing that same kind of work. And that's pretty incredible for boys to see their mom be in like a powerful career and to, you know, give those messages to them. That's
and I feel very fortunate that my husband has been supportive of that message, right? Like, you know, he also will say, yep, mom's working late. She's got to do that. You know, she's taking care of people, like, and that's okay too. And that's not like with resentment or anything else that sometimes can come.
That's awesome. That's great. So last question, then we'll be done. What about any final, like, one piece of advice that you would give women when it comes to their overall health and improving it? What would be your just one takeaway tip to give?
My one takeaway tip is maybe controversial, but I would say to be less selfless. Women will come to me and their kids will have these amazing lunches made, or they'll be going to like 4 different sporting events, and they'll tell me, I don't have time to make my own lunch. I don't have time to exercise. And I'll say, please just make your own dinner first. Your kids will eat. I promise you they'll eat, because you'll make it happen. You'll figure out a way to make it happen. Women do. But you can't be having scraps of leftovers and, you know, snacks when your kids have these like amazing meals. And you can't have not worked out for 10 years because
you've been raising a family and
or your kids are going
all the time.
Strength training program. Like you can sit down and figure out some ways to make this happen for you. I don't think it has to be major, but I do think women can be less selfless, and in the back end, they'll be a better person, mother, they'll like themselves a little bit better, whatever they need to be to be.
And there's no extra points for being a martyr.
No, there's not.
You know,
at the end of the day, there really isn't.
No. And women deserve to take care of themselves and make themselves a priority, especially when it comes to their health, and that time frame of your life where it's like you have like been putting aside things. You have been like, you know, a lot of women put aside their career aspirations and goals and things that they want to do in order to raise a family, because that's a core value for them, and more power to them. Absolutely. But then they hit a point in life where it's like they do need to come back to themselves, and they need to make their health a priority again and take care of themselves. And, you know, again, no extra points for being a martyr. So that's a good piece of advice.
I think that some of that has changed over time. I think a lot of women, I don't know if it's necessarily that they didn't find satisfaction in jobs, or that wasn't necessarily a thing. And a lot of their satisfaction in life was being a mother. But and maybe if that is your role, then that is your role, and that's okay. But for some women, it's not. And that's okay too, because we're all out there helping, doing amazing things and making the world run.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And someday your kids will grow up and move out and live their own lives. And so then you have to come back to yourself again, you know, and take care of you.
I don't think that you're helping anyone, particularly by becoming less healthy, right? Not moving your body, eating, you know, foods that we know have toxins on them, like way too much sugar, way too much preservatives, whatever's in a Dorito, right? Like none of those things are probably good for us. And it's okay probably to have every once in a while, but if it's the backbone of what you're eating, we got to come up with a different plan.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. That's good. I'm glad. that you talked about that. That's important. Thank you so much, Dr. Egan. I really appreciate your time. This was a big deal. I can't believe you spent this much time with us. I know you're busy. So thank you very much for your time. Where can people find you?
People, if they want to come see me as a patient, I'm at True Women's Health, which you can check us out at truewomenshealth.com. We have a bunch of different avenues that you can get help, whether it be menopause or weight management or primary care. And we're actually boarded in a couple different states. So even if you're not in Michigan.
Yeah. You guys can do telehealth too. So so if you're not in the state, you can do that. So that's great. All right. Well, thank you so much. Again, I really appreciate your time. It's been really great talking to you. It's a little different. Usually I'm behind the camera, like recording you doing talks with Dr. Brittner. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.